Texas, 1882, the noon sun scorched the tin roof of the Abilene train station, and the air shimmered above the tracks like heat rolling off a forge. Ronan Kessler had only come into town for supplies and a bolt of blue gingham for his sister's birthday. But the moment the woman in the green traveling dress crumpled to the platform boards, he dropped the package in his arms and ran. She had barely stepped off the Denver-bound train when her knees buckled. One gloved hand reached out for the cast iron railing missed, and she collapsed in a heap of skirts and pale limbs. People gasped. Someone shouted for a doctor. But Ronan was already there, crouched beside her. "Miss," his voice was gentle but firm as he touched her shoulder. "Can you hear me?" Her skin was damp with sweat and far too cold. He lifted her carefully, one arm behind her shoulders, the other beneath her legs. She was too light, and her bonnet had slid askew, revealing cheeks flushed with heat and exhaustion. "Where's the station agent?" Ronan called out as he stood, the woman limp in his arms. The agent hurried forward, red-faced and flustered. "She's the mail-order bride for the Cartwright Ranch. Due in today," said her name's Rosalie Norwood. Ronan looked down at her. "Rosalie, she did not stir. She needs rest. Shade, water," he said. "Where's the Cartwright man?" The agent hesitated. "He did not show, sent a telegram yesterday canceling the arrangement. Said he married someone local." Ronan blinked. "You are telling me this woman rode across 3 states and fainted on a platform in this heat, and there is no one here to meet her?" The agent looked miserable. "I was going to tell her myself." Ronan's jaw tightened. "No." "I will." He carried her across the platform to the bench beneath the shade of the depot awning. A few curious passengers watched, but most turned away. Mail-order brides were common enough, and rejection was not unheard of, though it was rarely so cruel. Rosalie stirred just as he lowered her gently onto the bench. Her eyes fluttered open soft hazel, rimmed with confusion and pain. "You fainted," Ronan said gently, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket and soaking it in the canteen at his belt. He pressed it to her forehead. "You are all right now." Her gaze flickered to his face, confused. She tried to sit up but winced and sank back. "Where is Mr. Cartwright?" she asked, voice hoarse from the dry air. Ronan hesitated. "He is not coming." She blinked slowly as if trying to process the words. "What?" he canceled. "Married someone else." For a moment, the platform noise faded, her lips parted, her hand trembled. Then she turned her face away and covered her mouth with her fingers. Ronan stood beside her, not speaking, just close enough if she needed something. When she finally looked back up, there were tears in her eyes, but they did not fall. "I sold everything," she whispered. "My mother's brooch to buy the train ticket. I have nowhere to go." "You are not alone," Ronan said. "My ranch is an hour west of here. I have a small house, extra room. You can rest there until you figure out what you want next." "I do not even know who you are," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ronan Kessler," he said simply. "I raise cattle and fix fences, and I do not leave women on train platforms in the heat." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing something deep in her heart. "I could help cook," she said quietly. "Clean, I do not want to be a burden." "You will not be," he said. He held out his hand. Slowly, she placed her gloved fingers in his. They rode in quiet through the hills, her satchel stowed behind them on the wagon, the dust rising behind the wheels. Ronan glanced at her now and then, her small hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "You from Colorado?" he asked after a while. "Originally Illinois," she said. "My father died in the war. My mother passed 4 years ago. There was nothing left but debt and a name no one remembered." Ronan nodded. He understood loss. He had buried his father at 20 and taken on the ranch alone. His sister moved east to teach school, and the silence of the land had been his only companion since. "I thought I was going to start a new life," she said after a moment. "You still can," he said simply. They reached the ranch just before dusk. The house was modest, 2 rooms, whitewashed, with a porch that looked out toward the canyon. A few chickens clucked near the coop, and a pair of bay horses grazed near the corral. Ronan helped her down from the wagon. She swayed slightly, but he steadied her. "You can have the front bedroom," he said. "I will sleep in the loft. I do not want to push you out of your own bed. You are not." Inside, she paused by the hearth, her eyes scanning the room, the worn armchair, the braided rug, the firewood stacked neatly along the wall. "It is kind of you," she said. "I just did what was right." But when she turned and looked up at him, something shifted. Her hand brushed his sleeve just a little, and she gave him a faint, tired smile. "Thank you, Ronan," he swallowed. "You are welcome, Rosalie." That night, as the fire crackled low and the coyotes howled in the distance, Ronan lay on his back in the loft, staring at the ceiling boards above. Below, he could hear the rustle of her blanket, the soft rhythm of her breath. She was not what he expected to find at the depot. He had gone to town for gingham and oats and would return with something far more rare: hope. And maybe, though it was too soon to say it aloud, maybe something else too. Something that stirred in his chest when she whispered his name and made the empty house feel like it was waiting for something better. He closed his eyes. Let her stay, he thought. Let her stay. Rosalie stood at the pump just past the chicken yard, sleeves rolled to her elbows as water spilled into the tin basin. Her hat shaded her face, but Ronan could still see the narrow line of concentration between her brows. She'd asked after breakfast if she might wash some linens, and he hadn't argued. He watched from the barn door, hands braced on his hips. The sun was higher now, and the scent of sage hung in the warming air. She moved slowly, but with a quiet steadiness that hadn't been present the day before. "You don't need to wear yourself down," he said, pushing off the door frame. Rosalie straightened, drying her hands on the front of her skirt. "I'm better for having something to do. You slept all right." "I did. Thank you for the quilt." It smelled like cedar. He nodded, unsure what to say to that. She'd folded her bedding neatly that morning and swept the floor without being asked. He hadn't expected her to settle so quickly. "I'll mend the hem on that curtain in the sitting room," she said, glancing toward the house. "It's come loose on the bottom left." Ronan rubbed his jaw. "You don't have to fix everything you see." "I know," she said, meeting his eyes. "But I want to." He didn't argue. Instead, he crossed to the rail fence and leaned against it. The wind stirred the grass beyond the barn where the hills rolled out toward the western ridge. "My mother used to say idle hands let sorrow in," she added. I think she was right. Ronan turned his head slightly. "You carry a lot of sorrow." "I carry what I've been given," she said simply. He looked at her for a long moment. "There's a difference between carrying and letting it weigh you down." She didn't answer right away. Then, "I suppose I'm still learning the difference." They were quiet for a while. A hawk circled overhead. One of the hens darted after a beetle near the woodpile. "Do you ever go to town?" she asked. "Beyond supply trips, only when I have to. Because of the ranch. Because I don't have much use for crowds." She nodded. "Me neither. But I used to like the library." "There's a library in Abilene. Just a shelf in the back of the general store," she said. "But they lend to anyone who asks." He made a mental note of that. "What did you read?" "Whatever I could find. Poetry, farm almanacs, papers from other states." "Once a book on medicinal herbs." Ronan lifted a brow. "You know plants." "I know enough to tell yarrow from wild carrot," she said. "And that mullein helps a cough." He motioned toward the edge of the pasture. "We've got a patch of wild mint in the draw. You can see it when it rains." "I'd like that," she said, a small light flickering behind her words. He stepped back from the fence. "You hungry?" "A little. I've got cornmeal and apples in the cellar. Thought I'd make a skillet cake." Her eyes softened. "May I help?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure, you can slice the apples." Inside, the kitchen filled with the scent of butter and wood smoke. Rosalie peeled fruit at the table while Ronan stirred batter beside the stove. They didn't speak much, but it wasn't the strained silence of strangers anymore. It was the kind that came with shared purpose, with a comfort not yet spoken aloud. She handed him the bowl of sliced apples when he reached for it. Their fingers brushed barely, but something in his chest shifted. "Your hands are steady," he said. "I've had to be steady." He met her gaze. "That's a rare thing." She didn't look away. I think steadiness finds steadiness. He didn't know what to say to that, so he turned back to the stove. The batter sizzled as it hit the hot skillet, and the scent of cinnamon rose in the air. Later they ate on the porch, the cake warm between them, plates balanced on their knees. The wind had picked up, tugging at the edge of her shawl. He watched her tuck it tighter. "I never thought I'd end up here," she said after a while, "but it doesn't feel wrong." Ronan looked at her carefully. "Do you want to leave?" "I don't know." "Not yet." The last light of evening caught in her hair, and the quiet between them deepened, not empty, but full of something slow and unsure and growing. "If you stay," he said, "you'll have your own say in everything. I won't expect anything from you." She looked at him then, long and steady. "And if I want to give something, in time," he didn't look away. "Then I'll meet you there," she nodded once. "That's fair." They finished their cake as the sun dipped behind the hills, and neither of them mentioned the train or the man who never came. That part of her story had ended. What came next hadn't been written yet, but it had begun here, where the porch wood creaked and the lamp inside glowed warm, and the space between them no longer felt like a gulf. By midweek, the rhythm between them had shifted into something unspoken, but felt like the way Rosalie folded the flour sack towels with care after washing, or how Ronan left the kettle just warm on the stove in the mornings before heading out to the southern pasture. The heat had eased some, and the breeze carried the scent of mesquite and dry creeked. Ronan returned late that afternoon with a coil of fencing wire slung over one shoulder and his hat pulled low against the sun. Rosalie was near the porch, kneeling beside a wooden crate she'd pulled from the shed, sorting through its contents with the same quiet attention she gave everything. "I was looking for thread," she said as he stepped closer. "Found your mother's sewing box instead." He set the wire down beside the porch steps. "You recognize it? There's a letter inside, folded into one of the lining seams." He crouched beside her, the dust on his boots stirring. The box was worn smooth in places, the latch rusted but still holding. She handed him the letter. The paper had yellowed and the handwriting leaned delicate and slanted. "She wrote it to you," Rosalie said softly, "but never sent it, or maybe she meant for you to find it like this." Ronan read the first few lines in silence. His face didn't change, but his fingers pressed the edges of the paper tighter. "She worried you'd work yourself into the ground," he said finally. "Said she hoped you'd let someone beside you someday, not behind." Rosalie brushed a bit of hay from her skirt. "Sounds like she knew the shape of your heart better than most." "I never thought anyone want to walk beside me," he said. "Not until you stepped off that train." She didn't touch him, but the space between them felt warmer somehow, like the air had thickened with meaning. "I didn't come here looking for you," she said, "but I think I was meant to find you just the same." He folded the letter carefully and tucked it back where it had come from. "I can't offer much, just this land and the work that keeps it alive." "I don't need more than what's true," she said. Later, Ronan hitched the wagon and asked if she'd ride with him to check the beehives west of the ridge. She tied her hair back with a strip of muslin and climbed up beside him, her hands steady on the rail. The road was rough, the wheels catching now and then on stones hidden beneath the sand, but she didn't flinch. "Do you ever miss your sister?" she asked as the horses crested the rise. "Every day," he said, "but she's where she needs to be." "She writes when she can." "Did she teach you to read?" "My father did," he said. "He thought a man should know letters even if he worked with cattle." Rosalie smiled faintly. "My mother taught me with the Book of Psalms. Said the world could take everything else if it had to, but not what you'd memorized." They reached the grove where the hive stood, shaded by cottonwoods. The bees moved lazily in the heat, their sound low and constant. Ronan checked the boxes, then motioned to a fallen log near the edge of the clearing. "Sit a while," he said. "You look worn." "I'm not," she said, but joined him anyway. "It's just quieter here than anywhere I've known." "That bother you?" "No. It's the kind of quiet that keeps your thoughts company." He didn't answer right away, just watched the bees drift between the clover blossoms. Then, "I used to think quiet meant being alone." And now he looked at her. Now it means I'm not afraid of what I'll hear." They sat like that for a long time, the wind stirring her skirt, the air thick with the scent of honey and dust. She didn't speak again until they climbed back into the wagon. "Do you think your mother would have liked me?" He didn't hesitate. "She'd have said you were a bomb to warn places." Rosalie looked down at her hands. "And what do you say?" He took up the reins. "I say if you choose to stay, I'll spend every day making sure you don't regret it." She didn't answer right away. But as they turned back toward the house, her hand found the edge of his coat sleeve, just barely, and didn't let go. Rosalie stood at the edge of the goat pen, her apron pinned up, and a bucket of scraps in one hand. The sun slanted lower behind the ridge, throwing long shadows across the dust, and the animals stirred restlessly, bleating at her presence. She watched them a moment, then scattered the peelings and crusts into the trough. The goats pressed forward, jostling with dull persistence. Behind her, Ronan approached with a small coil of rope slung over his shoulder. He paused before speaking, as he often did when his thoughts ran deeper than the moment required. "I've seen you watching the slope past the barn," he said. "You waiting on something?" She dusted her hands on her skirt and turned to face him. "No, just thinking how the light catches the ridge there, same time every evening." He looked past her to the hill's curve. "There's a spring fed by snowmelt up that way. Doesn't run more than half the year, but the grass stays green longer." "I'd like to see it," she said. "I'll take you tomorrow if you're up to the climb." She nodded once, but her gaze lingered on his face. "Do you ever think about building more here?" He shifted the rope to his other hand. "What do you mean?" "Not just more fence or more animals, I mean more of a life, a deeper root." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer to the pen, resting one arm across the top rail. "I've thought about planting an orchard, apples maybe. Something that takes years to bear." "That's a kind of hope," she said. He looked at her then. "I didn't let myself hope much before you came." A long silence passed between them. She didn't break it. She only stepped forward and rested her hand on the rail beside his, their fingers nearly touching. "I'd help you plant them," she said. He turned his palm upward, and she placed hers lightly in his. There was no urgency in it, just the quiet weight of understanding. They stood like that until the goats wandered off, and the air began to cool. The next morning they set out early, before the sun had fully risen. Rosalie wore her shawl knotted at her waist, and Ronan carried a small satchel of bread and cheese. They walked along the cattle trail that curved eastward, the ground soft beneath their boots from the night's dew. As they climbed, the land changed. Thickets of scrub gave way to patches of aspen, their leaves trembling in the wind. The air smelled of pine sap and wet stone. Halfway up, Rosalie paused to catch her breath. Ronan waited beside her, gaze scanning the horizon. "I didn't think it would be so still up here," she said. "It's where I come when I need reminding the world's bigger than what weighs on me." She tipped her face into the breeze. "You carry things quiet." He glanced at her, then looked out again. There wasn't anyone to carry them with before. They reached the spring just before noon. It was nothing grand, a narrow stream trickling from under a split rock, pooling in a shallow basin lined with moss. But the grass around it was thick and bright, and a stand of wild iris swayed at the edge of the clearing. Rosalie knelt near the water, trailing her fingers through it. Cold as a mountain lake. Ronan crouched beside her. "It's fed from higher up. There's snow all year in the peaks past the divide." She looked at him, the reflection of the sky caught in her eyes. "Do you want children, Ronan?" He met her gaze without flinching. "I want a home that holds more than silence. If children come from that, I'd raise them honest." She nodded slowly. "I never wanted to marry a man just to escape being alone. I wanted to belong to something that grew." He didn't speak, but he reached for her hand again, and this time she didn't hesitate. Their fingers laced together, and the warmth of his grip steadied something in her that had ached hollow for too long. Later, they sat beneath the aspen trees, sharing the bread and cheese. A bird called from somewhere above, and the wind carried the scent of wet earth and lilac. "I've been thinking," she said, brushing crumbs from her lap. If I stay, I'd like to keep a hive of my own, near the house. There's a place by the fence where the lavender grows. He looked at her sidelong, a rare softness in his eyes. Then we'll build one. She smiled, not the strained kind she'd worn when she arrived, but a quiet, settled thing that reached her whole face. And the orchard? She asked. We'll start with 6 trees, he said. 3 for me. 3 for you. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and he let his arm come around her back, careful, like asking permission. I think your mother would have liked the sound of that, she said. He nodded. So do I. They stayed there until the sun dipped low and the shadows stretched long across the clearing. When they walked back down the trail together, they moved in step, the space between them filled not with questions, but with something steady and already taking root. By early June, the land had softened under late spring rains. The creek that bordered the western edge of Ronan's property ran higher than usual, and the cottonwoods along its banks shimmered with new green. Rosalie stood beneath one of them, gathering wild mint and dandelion leaves in a woven basket she'd made from last year's corn husks. Her fingertips were stained with earth, and her hemline was damp from the morning dew that clung to the grass. Ronan found her there just past mid-morning, his sleeves rolled to the elbow and a folded piece of lumber balanced on one broad shoulder. You still planning on that beehive? He asked, his voice low and even. I've started shaping the frame, she said. It'll need sealing with wax before I settle the combs. I thought I'd ask after the old cedar stumps behind the barn. There's one we cut last winter that's dry enough. I'll split it for you. His gaze shifted to the basket. That for tea or something stronger? Poultices. The neighbor's girl came by yesterday with a rash on her arms. I said I'd mix something for her. She straightened, brushing her palms together. She said her mother remembers you from before your father passed. Ronan studied the tree bark beside him. She was kind to us. Brought over bread the day we buried him, never asked for anything back. She said she worries about you alone. He looked up, his expression unreadable. I'm not alone anymore. The wind stirred between them, lifting strands of her hair loose from their pin. You ever think about what it means to be married? She asked, eyes fixed on the creek. I have, he said. More lately. I don't want a wedding with lace and ribbons, just something honest. You'd have that with me if you wanted it. She turned to face him fully. I'd want it with you, Ronan, only you. He set the lumber down, and his boots left deep prints as he crossed the soft earth between them. He reached for her hands, rough calloused palms meeting her smaller ones. Then we'll speak to the circuit preacher when he passes through next. No fuss. Just our word and a piece of this land to witness it. She leaned into him, her forehead resting against his collarbone. I didn't think I could be someone's home. You are, he said. You're mine. The wedding was held a week later beneath the split-limbed oak that shaded the northern rise. The preacher rode in from tie and read from a pocket Bible, his voice low and sure. Rosalie wore a dress the color of cream, stitched from muslin she'd saved for years. Ronan wore the same black coat he'd buried his father in. It fit a little tighter now, but he stood tall beside her. They exchanged no rings, only promises. His voice stayed steady through his, but hers caught once, just for a breath before she carried on. After they shared coffee and cornbread with the handful of neighbors who'd come, and when the sun dipped low, Rosalie and Ronan walked back toward the house, hand in hand. Inside, the fire had already been lit. The kettle sang on the stove, and the quilt she'd finished just days before was folded at the foot of their bed. A single room now, warm with lamplight and the soft echo of vows still hanging in the air. Are you afraid? She asked quietly as she unpinned her hair. No, he said. Not of this. She crossed the floor and stood before him, her hands resting lightly against his chest. I used to think I'd always be waiting for someone who never came. His hand cupped the back of her neck. I used to think I was too far gone to be found. They kissed then, not hurried or uncertain, but with the slow, sure weight of two people who had walked through long silences, hard winters, and the ache of absence to reach one another. That night, the wind slipped past the eaves like a lullaby, and the house, once quiet from grief, filled with the soft sound of belonging. The orchard was planted before the first frost. 6 saplings, just as they'd said, 3 on the west side, 3 on the east, with room between them for the hive Rosalie had built by hand. The bees came in spring, and so did the blossoms. By the time the first apples ripened, the house had grown by 1 new room and the sound of a baby's cry in the early morning dark. They named her Clara, after Ronan's mother. She had her father's steadiness and her mother's fine hands. Rosalie rocked her on the porch in the evenings, humming old hymns under her breath while Ronan came in from the fields, boots dusty, eyes soft. Neighbors said the Kesslers kept a good home, quiet but full. Folks stopped by to trade honey and seedlings, sometimes just to sit a while and hear Rosalie laugh, or see Clara toddle after the chickens with a determined scowl. Years passed. The orchard grew thick and wild with fruit. The bees stayed, and so did the quiet joy of a life built slow and honest. And in the early mornings, before the sun crested the ridge, Ronan would sometimes wake to find Rosalie watching him, her hand resting just above his heart. "You still glad I stayed?" she'd whisper. He'd answer the same every time without fail. "I thank God every day that you did."